picture is the actual closest I can get you visually to the heart of this message today. And as our time does unfold together, it is my hope that I can bring the heart of this message to you verbally, passionately, that I can persuade you emotionally, that I can challenge and charge you spiritually. This picture is actually the first picture taken of me in freedom. After serving close to 5 years in prison, nobody get up and leave, let me finish. After serving that amount of time, this picture is not the posture of somebody that was dying to get out of there. This picture is actually the reflection of surrender, the echo of a soul that was dying to live while in there, dying daily to self in order to live daily to God. So as you are turning to our verse of reference this morning, Matthew 16, verses 24 through 26, you can see it on the board. I'm going to give you an illustration through storytelling of what it looks like to die in order to live. It was April 1st, 2014. On this particular day, it was no Fool's Day. I was being transferred from Mid-State Correctional Facility to Southern State Correctional Facility. I was going from about 2 hours from my home location to about 30 minutes. For the first time in about 4 years, I'd be entering my hometown. So what was to be expected? Well, I would know more of the inmates. I would know certainly some of the corrections officers, the supervisors. The day before your transfer, they tell you to pack up all your stuff. Can you imagine how much stuff you can accumulate over 4 years in that setting? Let's just talk about the books, countless books, the weightiness to folders and paperwork, your clothing, your hygienical products, your bedding. Everything is thrown into these bags, these extra large bags. They send up bins. You put your bags into the bins. It's very easy. You wheel your bin down to the property office. They, with a piece of paper, go over each item. The next time you see your property is at your new facility. It takes several days, of course. They call you by number. You go down to the property office at the new facility. You pick up all of your property. They give you bins again with wheels, and you go across the compound or the facility, and you are welcomed into your new housing unit. That's the protocol. I spent 7 days in my new housing unit. I'm unpacking, and I'm getting used to a new routine, and all of a sudden, an officer comes up to me and says, "Mayor, you got to pack up. They're moving you." Okay? So I pack up all my stuff. I get everything into bags, no big deal. He says, "Hold up. I'm going to look into this further. I'm going to move you to a different unit before they move you." They're apparently trying to move you to the other compound, which was some distance away. Okay? So I go to this new unit, which was only about 50 yards away from where I was, no big deal. I have the carts. I unpack. I get situated. I go to dinner. After dinner, "Mayor, pack up. They're moving you again." Now I'm realizing in the moment of conversation with certain officers that somebody was up to something. You see, this was supposed to be my homecoming. I only had 4 months left to do on a 5.5-year sentence. It was supposed to be easier, smoother sailing. And of course, I could have pinpointed it to people, but I knew it was something greater, something bigger. The gates of hell. See, the gates of hell close in right when you're on the verge of a release. So I could have judged it that way, but I didn't. You see, this other move, after I pack up all my stuff, I request these same carts. The supervisor came out himself and said, politely, kindly, through a string of expletives and curse words, "You're not getting a cart." Now I'm left with these huge bags filled with all my property. I brought in my own example of what that looked like. Obviously, this is a mini version, but if you can imagine, each bag is filled with what have you. All your stuff. The bag of books alone was so weighty, it would take 2 people just to lift it and put it in that cart. Now they're telling me there's no cart. I have to lift it myself. So an old head comes up to me. He says, "Hey, you got to make a harness. Take another bag, wrap it up tightly in between, tie it to one, tie it to the other. That way you can hoist it over your shoulders like this." And I have 4 bags, so 2 go this way, the 2 the other way, and they are heavy. And I'm setting out on about a half-a-mile journey to the other compound. Displaced weight, shifting weight, uncomfortable weight. In fact, the tightly wrapped plastic is digging into my neck. What can I compare it to? Well, it felt like I was carrying a dead body. Not that I know what that feels like, so relax. Somebody just got up and ran out, okay? But as I'm making this journey, one step at a time, this weight is shifting, and I'm complaining, and I'm agitated, and I'm frustrated. I'm carrying the weight. I get to my new housing unit. I move myself in. The area is so much smaller. I had a bottom bunk. The top bunk was literally like 2 feet above the bottom bunk. So as I'm sitting there, I can barely sit in that space. My bags are all over the place. People are walking over them, walking by. I'm being ignored. Can you imagine what that felt like? Complaining. Made phone calls to home, complaining, agitated. I sit down. I take off my shirt to let my body breathe. And there was these laceration marks around my neck and down my back. And an inmate came up to me and he said, "Wow, looks like you were carrying a cross." And right there, church, I was convicted. You see, I had carried everything except my cross. 2 days later, pack up, Mayor. They're moving me to a completely different compound about a mile away. Again, the request for a cart denied. This time we traveled in packs, about 10 of us. Some guys had almost just as much as me. Some had less. But as I set out on this second journey, I was determined to have a different outcome. Same baggage, same weight, yet my attitude changed. You heard the saying, attitude affects altitude. So as I set out, can you picture this? I'm picking up all these bags. I'm like a man possessed by the Holy Spirit, running my bags about 15 yards forward, putting everything down, going back and helping the older inmates out with their stuff, grabbing their bags, running back to my bags, putting it down, back and forth. I was doing that so kind of belligerently, a guy comes up to me and says, "Yo, man, you better stop running in the prison facility. They're going to take you out from the towers." I remember thinking, there would probably be no better way to go out than that. We get to a gate. The gate, we're waiting for it to open. Everybody's kind of exhausted. They're huffing. They're complaining. They're cursing. And a guy looks at me and he says, "It looks like you're enjoying this." And I said, "No, I'm just thinking about what Jesus went through as he carried his cross." He just said, "Word." Let's talk about what word means. No. I get to the new facility, obviously. I'm unpacking. Again, same weight. A guy that I helped out, he came up to me with a stack of men's health magazines. They were probably so heavy for him to carry. And he hands them to me. Either a kind gesture for helping him out, or he realized it was time to downsize himself. And then he said this, "I've never seen anything like that before. People only look out for themselves in here. And you looked out for other people." And he went off. You see, I realized in that moment, the first trip, I failed miserably. I was carrying the weight. The second trip, I suffered successfully. I was carrying my cross. The cross is an attitude that you pick up, regardless of any amount of weight or circumstances bearing down. The cross, church, so important. You know what it does? It removes the trap of us only looking out for ourselves, and it empowers us to look out for other people. Jesus said this to his disciples, to his students, to the students of the church and of the word. "If anyone desires to come after me," you see this word desire that precedes come after. The only way for us to actually come after is to have more than a desire. You see, I have a desire to do something, but unless I put feet to that desire, I'll never do anything. Does that make sense? You see, a desire has to have discipline and sacrifice attached to it. The only way for a desire to find traction is for discipline and sacrifice to precede it. An athlete. I was an athlete. I had a desire to be a pro soccer player one day. And I watched my older brother and I followed in his footsteps, but the desire wasn't enough. You see, sacrifice and discipline had to kick in. The traction was that. I had to spend time in the gym. I had to spend extra hours on the field. I had to suffer and sacrifice on the front end. That way I could benefit on the back end. You see, suffering is always going to happen. Did you know that? You're either going to suffer on the front end, you're going to put the time in, the work in, the prayer in, the faith in, or you're going to suffer on the back end. You see, as an athlete, you go to the gym. You run on that treadmill. You're suffering. You're pushing through it outside of your comfort zone. So that way when you're on the field, you know what happens? You perform. You're not exhausted. You have stamina. Or you don't put time in the gym. You don't get on the treadmill. You just think you can play. You're going to suffer on the back end as you're kneeled over, exhausted with a cramp and a possible injury. You're going to suffer. You choose when, where, and how you suffer. If anyone has a desire to come after me, Jesus said, I say to come after Jesus, nothing can come before Jesus. To come after Jesus, nothing can actually come before Jesus. I have to have tunnel vision to see him. I'm reminding of the first commandment in Exodus chapter 20. God, out of his own mouth, says this, I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt. I brought you out of the world. I set you apart. I sanctified you. Out of the world system that was trying to conform you and mold you, I separated you from that. I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. I set you free. You were in slavery. Now you're in liberty. I have your attention. You shall have no other gods before me, he said. And we say, we got that one. Check. Go on to the next commandment. No, but we miss it. You see, he's not saying, as long as I'm first, you can do whatever you want second and whatever you want third. He's not saying that. We think that. I come to church on Sunday. I do my small group. Check, God. Then I can do me, number 2. Do my family, number 3. God is not inviting us to be number 1 in our lives. He's actually saying, I don't want to be a number on a list. I actually want to be the list. And I'll prioritize those items. Delight yourself in the Lord, and I'll give you the desires of your heart. See, that's what that means, that when we come after Jesus, nothing can come before Jesus. Interestingly, when God said, nothing shall be in my presence, nothing before me, he wasn't saying that order thing. He was saying, in my presence whatsoever. Can you imagine an omnipotent, omnipresent God saying, you can't have anything in my presence? Well, you're omnipresent, God. How is that possible? No, but he's such a gentleman, the God we serve. He bows to humanity, and he allows us to have a piece of his sovereignty. You know what that looks like? It's called free will. And he allows us to make decisions. So we actually bring things into his presence, which blocks out his presence. Now, we can talk about all types of things that we bring into his presence that eclipses his presence from us, but I'm just going to sum them up with 3 S's. It's the 3 S's that fight for our soul. So if you're taking notes, you can write them right next to anyone that desires to come after me. The 3 S's that fight for the position in our souls is the God of self. The God of self fights for our attention on a daily basis. You know what the God of self looks like? You want to know? I need you to participate in this, and everybody say cheese. The selfie-saturated society that we live in, that's what the God of self looks like. He's always fighting for your attention. He's fighting for your time. He wants you to feel bad about life. He's self-centered. He's self-saturated. He's self-absorbed. He's self-indulged. He's self-esteemed. He's self-confident. You can't tell the difference. He's self-righteous. Self, self, self. You see, when self thinks it's in his own strength, he thinks he's incredible. But then there's the other side of that. When self thinks he's terrible in his own skin, self-loathing, self-hatred, self-depressed. Self is fighting for my attention. And if I allow him to sit on my throne, guess what? I can't see God. Then we go into the next S. It's the God of sin. The God of sin fights for your condition. What does that look like? Well, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Interestingly, the God of self empowers the God of sin to have his way. See, sin in your condition, he wants to make you feel worthless. He wants to make you feel guilty all the time. He wants you to feel shameful, the God of sin. He wants you to have excuses to go down a certain path because, hey, you're already there. What's the point of stopping now? The God of sin. Then there's the God of Satan. The God of Satan fights for our destruction. Let me repeat them for you. God of self fights for our attention. God of sin fights for our condition. The God of Satan fights for our destruction. Again, as this pyramid is set, God of self empowers sin. Sin gives access to Satan. Self empowers sin. Sin gives access to Satan. Satan can touch whatever is his. If you're playing in his stuff, he has a right to be there. Did you know that? Touch the bottle, touch the drug, touch the computer screen in an appropriate website. He has a right, because we're where his stuff is, to touch our life. Some of us are bringing him right into our homes. Some of us are intercepting our children's lives by checking what they're doing on social media, and the devil's walking right into your house, right into your screen, and right into our children's souls. God of self, God of sin, the God of Satan. So how are we to combat such subtle invitations and even these aggravated assaults against us? Jesus says this: if you have a desire to come after me, deny yourself. You see, if self's in the way and self empowers sin, and then sin gives access to Satan, if you put self down, you completely defeat sin, which can't give access to Satan. How do we deny ourselves? Some say it's self-denial, but I want to introduce something to you. Self-denial to me, as I imagine what it looks like, is like a monk in a mountain. self-denial, saying no to the pleasures of life. And in his misery, he's righteous, right? But it's still self-denial, which means self is still doing all the work. It's not self-denial, it's denying self. Self, you have no right here. It's putting self down. We say it's dying to self. So let's take a field trip, church. We're going to go to a cemetery. And as we go to the cemetery, I don't care what you do. You can do whatever you want to that particular location. You can arouse them. You can compliment them. You can encourage them. You can criticize them. You could say bad things about them. You could throw stones at them. You can offer them pleasures and temptations. Guess what the response will be in the cemetery? Nothing. That's what dying to self looks like. There's no response. You see, I'm not to be aroused by the world around me. I'm to be stimulated by the Spirit of God within me. You know what that looked like? The perfect example? Jesus. So many stories as he's preaching and teaching to the masses and he's healing, they wanted to take him and make him king. Can you imagine the compliments, the flattery? Hey, Jesus, come sign autographs over here. Hey, Jesus, hey, take a selfie over here. Yet in all those cases, you know what he did? He removed himself from that. He was unmoved by that. And then I'm reminded, right before he went on the Via Dolorosa, which is the way of suffering, the way to the cross, he's standing before Pontius Pilate. Now here you have God in flesh, the most brilliant lawyer of all time, the most brilliant mind. Can you imagine? He could have pitched his own case, all the evidence, and got himself out without anybody even blinking, right? Yet here he is, taking all these accusations, all these blames, and the Bible says, and he answered not a word. I don't know about you, when somebody spits on me or slaps me, I'm responding, unless I'm putting self down. You see, Jesus was unresponsive to the world around him because he was only responding to the world above him. If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself. And then when self is no longer in the way, then you can take up your cross. It's not a self act. Self's no longer in the way. It's the Spirit that empowers you to take up your cross. So we can talk about what the cross looks like, but I'd rather talk about what the cross is not. You ready for this? The cross is not a sickness. The cross is not a burden. The cross is not a set of circumstance that you're putting up with. The cross isn't even an adversity. Hey, the cross wasn't even my incarceration. The cross is so much different than that. The cross isn't even this. Now, let me give you a story as I explain what this is. Eyes on me. Pastor's counseling a husband and wife, and he's explaining to them what the cross is, and he turns to the wife and he says, "Can you identify your cross?" And as she nudges her eyes over towards her husband, she says, "You're looking at him." Don't look anywhere else. Look on me. I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. That's not your cross either, putting up with somebody. No, the cross is a choice you make. It's something you do within any given situation. It's how you respond to something. I say this, the cross is something you do willingly and lovingly to help somebody else out redemptively. If they would put it on the screen, the cross is something you do willingly and lovingly to help somebody else out redemptively. I move quick, they got to stay with me. Just recently, actually, on the edge of summer, we were out in the Wooders, North Street Beach for baptism. Unbelievable scene. And we were privileged to baptize those who came forward. But I'll never forget what happened next. Pastor Matt's out there, Pastor Sal, myself, and the elders. And we were told to come inshore. We were about to baptize somebody that needed us to come in, and they couldn't be submerged. And this individual, you may know her. Her name is Donna Vanell. And she went home to be with the Lord a few Sundays ago. And Donna was cancer-stricken. And as we were baptizing her, one of the elders began to pray over her, praying for healing. And she stopped him mid-sentence. And she says, "No, even if God doesn't heal me, I'm thankful in this. I'm thankful because the glory of God has been seen through this. My family and my friends have come to know Jesus through this." You see, Donna knew something. Donna had something. Donna had something that was greater than any physical healing. She understood what Matt taught last week, that the greatest miracle is the saving of the soul. And she knew that one day she would see her Redeemer and she would find ultimate healing. Never to downplay those conditions and those situations. I cannot imagine the weight that it must play on somebody's physicality and even their emotional person. But I'm telling you that if there's something deeper on the inside of you, in the soul, in the spirit, then no amount of weight can wear you down the way Donna was able to suffer successfully. You see this? Donna's sickness was not her cross. You know how I know that? Because Jesus went to the cross for Donna's sickness. And because he went to the cross, many people think death took Jesus, but I'm here to tell you, Jesus took death. And because Jesus took death, Jesus is the one that called Donna home to eternal healing. I want to make some distinctions. I don't want people to confuse Jesus' cross with their own personal cross. You see, Jesus' cross, his cross is the finished work of the ultimate sacrifice. When he went to that cross and he said, "Te telestai" in Greek, which means it is finished, he was shouting the words of victory. Let me paint the picture. It's an artist who finishes his project, the work that he has done. He's satisfied. He says, "It is finished." It is the priest who gets done his sacrificial duties. He rolls his sleeves up. He says, "It is finished." It is the warrior who gets off the battlefield. After victory, he shouts, "It is finished." It is an accountant who justifies every account rightly. He gets done. He says, "It is finished." It's a judge who gets done rendering his sentence, and justice was the center. He says, "It is finished." So when Jesus said, "It is finished," he was saying, every debt that you owe, I'm paying. He paid our sin debt in full. It is finished. That finished work you can't add to, you can't take away from. What happens is he deposits in your account righteousness. And all you have to do is withdraw it. So if that's his cross, what's my cross? Well, my cross is what teaches me humility, obedience, and offers me liberty. Can you imagine if you can think about what Jesus died for? That I can bear my own cross and be set free. See, many say, there's a school of thought, philosophy, psychology, that certain sins, certain conditions, certain addictions are more problematic and more demonic than others. Interestingly, if that's true, that means when Jesus died on the cross and said, "It is finished," that certain things weren't finished. That certain sins he didn't take the sting out of. That can't be true. See, I think the school of thought should go like this, that people struggle because they fail to put self down. And when self lives, they lose. Romans 6, you can parallel it with this message today. You can take time and read it on your own. I'm going to highlight two verses. Verse 6 in Romans 6 and verse 11. Verse 6 says this, "Knowing this, that our old man or our old woman was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with." Your version may said that the body of sin may be destroyed. In other words, the Greek word is katergo. It means that the body of sin may be rendered inactive, that the body of sin may be paralyzed. Can you imagine? The body of sin is paralyzed. It has no right over me anymore unless I revive it. Do you understand what your free will can do? Both ways, revive the body of sin or revive the body of Christ. Then in verse 11, he says this, Paul's writing, "Likewise, you also reckon yourselves to be dead indeed to sin." Dead. No response to it. "But alive to God in Christ Jesus our Lord." The word reckon is an accounting term. It means do the math. If Jesus says, your account has been paid in full, you owe me nothing, just live for me, do the math. Add it up. You'll find that you are dead to that condition. You don't have to allow it to have reign over you. You can live in freedom and liberty. When you pick up your cross, you pin your flesh down, and the Spirit of God can rise up in you. What else is his cross? His cross was a place where God imputed upon us his righteousness. It's called the Great Exchange. You see, when all the sin of the world, past, present, and future, went onto Jesus, he imputed upon us his own righteousness, his own holiness, not by the things you'll do or won't do, but simply because it was a gift by God. Again, I go back to that account analogy. There's been $1 million put in everybody's account. Now, you could choose not to believe me, or you can go check up on it and take the withdrawal. Which one are you going to do? Righteousness is there for you. So if that's his cross, what's my cross? Well, my cross is the motivational reminder of God's faithfulness. Anytime I'm struggling with life, if I can just elevate my eyes and my heart a little higher and see the cross of Christ and realize what he did for me. See, let me put it like this. If it has touched your life, church, trust and know that it has passed through the scarred hands of Jesus Christ. That may change that day. And it should be a motivational reminder that God is faithful. Matt touched on Johnny Erickson Tada last week. Her life, 17 years old, she jumps into the bay. She's a quadriplegic from that point forward. For the first 2 years of her life, she was bitter, she was angry, she cursed God until she realized and she heard this small voice saying, this is for my glory. And it was in the midst of that paralysis, which was not her cross. Her response from that day forward, as she worked it out, can't move, but she's moving the nations with her testimony. She said this, it is a glorious thing to know that your Father God makes no mistakes in directing or permitting that which crosses the path of your life. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is our glory to trust him no matter what. I highlighted just part of her quote. I said, that which crosses the path of our lives. That which crosses the path of your life, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. I don't care what it is. That's not your cross. But how you walk the path, that's your cross. How you respond on the path. Menelik II, who is he? He was the emperor of Ethiopia from 1889 to 1913. Menelik II was excited when he heard that America and Europe were using this new device to execute their criminals. It was the electric chair. Excited, he ordered himself one for his country until it arrived and he realized it needed electric. In the days before electricity in Ethiopia, he was undaunted. He was unaffected. He said, if I cannot use the chair to execute criminals, I shall use it to execute my commands. And for the next 15 years, he sat in an electric chair like it was his throne as he administered his proclamations. Jesus did something infinitely greater. You see, when he went to that cross, he turned an instrument of death and violence into an instrument of life and influence. Things changed that day. He turned shame into salvation. He turned grief into glory. He turned rejection into redemption. That's his cross. So what's my cross? Well, my cross is the avenue that is able to impact any audience. Take a look around. Young, old, everywhere in between. Black, white, ethnicities different. It is the cross that has drawn us together. Jesus said it. Hey, if I'll be lifted up, I'll draw all men, all women to myself. It is the cross that is cross-generational. We must know how to bear our cross because it's the very cross that is able to impact any audience. Now, there was a certain job detail that I got moved to in prison, and I was the weight stacker, so I got to go out into the prison yard. But one thing about the job detail was the supervisor, she was very hard on the inmates. People knew that she was very difficult to deal with. She almost had like a reputation that she despised the inmate population. Nobody knew why, but we steered clear from her. Well, the few interactions that I had with her, very polite. I was very kind to her, and I kept moving. I didn't know she was watching me the first several probably weeks of being on her detail. And what she saw in that amount of time was me walking in the prison yard, doing laps. And I would do laps with different individuals, people that wanted to have advice or counsel or they just wanted to talk, and I would say, sure. So she saw me walking with gang members. She saw me walking with murderers, rapists. She saw me walking with all types of charges, all types of people, all types of colors. And she called me over one day and she said, Mayor, why are you talking to all those people? Well, just letting them talk and hearing their story out, no big deal. She says, interesting. You know what type of people you're talking to, right? Yes, ma'am. She says, you know where you're at, right? I said, yes, ma'am. I'm exactly where God needs me to be. And it was right there where I believe that seed was planted because every day she would call me over to the gate and she would ask me more questions. And without giving you the gist of what I would say to her, I basically was telling her how I was able to walk in the yard with people. I was able to say to her, I lay me down. I'm not my own. I belong to him alone. Hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Come to find out, the reason why she had a bent toward the inmates that way is she lost her son. He was murdered by a gang member. So every day when she put that uniform on and came into work and she saw the browns that we were wearing, it reminded her of life that she didn't have. Then I told her I lost an older brother. My mom can empathize with what she's going through. And would you have it that this relationship was struck up, that I was able to straightforward tell her, you need to forgive this young man. And I explained how I was the recipient of forgiveness and God's mercy by my victim's family. And she just sat there and listened. And every day she would come back from these trials and say, I'm that close. I think I'm going to forgive him. Can you imagine? It was the cross. I didn't tell her anything but the cross. Paul said it. Matt said it last week. I'm determined not to know anything among you except Christ and him crucified. We move on. Finally, verse 24, the end, and follow me. You see what it takes to follow him? Man, don't be discouraged. You see, when you embrace that first cross, he empowers you to pick up your cross. If you have a desire to come after Jesus, put self down, pick cross up, and then follow Jesus. Why does he tell us to follow him? Because the fastest way for us to get lost is to follow our own lead. You want to get lost? Follow your own lead. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You see, he's the way to go, he's the truth to know, and he's the life to show. Now, Jesus is the originator of the words, follow me. But now, in our generations, we see follow me come up in all types of social media networks, don't we? Instagram, follow me. Twitter, follow me. Make sure you're following me. Now, as I go around on the speaking circuit, funded by State Farm, I share my story with high school students, college students. I'm able to share my story. I wear my heart on my sleeve, try to make a giant impact. And without fail, every single assembly, during the Q&A, you would think I would get questions like, man, what was it like? Or tell us more about that night. Or what was the dialogue between you and your victim's family? And I do get those. But one question I can identify as soon as a person raises their hand, and I always call on them because I know what the response that I'm going to give them is. They say, if we follow you on Instagram, will you follow us back? I love it. But here's the idea. Everybody wants followers on their social media networks. That's the idea. Get as many followers as possible. If you want as many followers as possible, guess what you're saying? You're denoting that you're a leader. And if you want followers, then you should be leading people somewhere. So indirectly, I ask them, well, if you have followers, where are you leading them? I'm basically saying, without hurting their feelings, why would I follow you if you're not leading me anywhere except to a selfie? Interestingly, I get hundreds of followers after every assembly. But over time, when they realize I'm not following them back, they defollow me. Okay? And then this other thing happens. I'll post a picture with my wife or us out and about, and I'll have the caption be something about my faith, about Jesus Christ, about grace. And it's those people that are offended by that post that defollow me. And I say, are we really that different from that? You see, God's saying, follow me. We say, okay, I'll follow you if you follow me. I'll follow you if you give me my way. I'll follow you, God, if you come with me this way and bless this thing. And then he says, okay, here's my Instagram to the world. His name's Jesus Christ. And the caption that goes with Jesus Christ is his word. And sometimes when he drops a picture on us or post on us, we're offended by it and we defollow him. I'm not going back to that church. Did you hear what Pastor Matt Stokes said last week about cats? I don't like cats either. Oh, follow me. And then we get to verse 25. Verse 25 says this. Jesus is kind of changing gears here. He just gets done saying, hey, if you have a desire to come after me, deny yourself, pick up your cross, and then follow me, because I won't lead you anywhere that you shouldn't be. And then he changes his thought process and he says, for whoever desires to save his own life will lose it. You see, if you don't want to go that route, take those steps, and you're trying to live your own life, save your own life, do your own thing, gain control over an out-of-control situation, hey, it's not going to work out. You're going to lose it. You're going to be worse off. You're going to be lost. He says, if you desire to find life, then lay your life down for my sake. But whoever desires to lose his life for my sake will find it. You see, interestingly, he's telling us life isn't about what you can get. It's about what you can give. How do I know this? John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave. Love gives. See, if God gave us his all, he bankrupted heaven to send Jesus to earth. He gave me his everything. Then I'm in need of nothing when I have Jesus. And if I have everything, then why am I looking for something outside of Jesus? It doesn't add up. Life is about giving, not getting. We were created to bring glory to the Creator. That's what God had in mind when he created. Now, after I understand what God gave, what is the purpose of my life? Our purpose, the aim, not to get things, but to give away. Give life away, give peace away, give joy away, give your testimony away, give your time away, give your energy away, give your emotions away. Because in the giving, God pays you back greater than you can get anywhere else. Aim not to get, but to give. I'm reminded of our Christmas ministry. The Lasser family was here with us this morning. Their mission and their ministry during Christmas is Matt's stocking. Now, I'm certain there's probably still stockings on that board. Your response has been unbelievable. We thank you for it. But what happened that first Christmas with her son's stocking, who was killed in a car accident, me and her son Matt, my name Matt, were actually very close. He was 12, I was 13. And that first Christmas, she didn't know what to do with his stocking. So she said, if I put it away, that wouldn't seem right. If I hang it up, that wouldn't seem right. So you know the story. She filled it up with presents, and she gave it away. You know how many years have gone by? How many lives and families have been blessed because she decided, I can't get my son back, but I can give back. Do you understand what I'm saying, church? Aim not to get, but to give. Verse 26, for what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Matt touched on this last week too. What does it profit if you gain the whole universe, yet you lose your soul? Matt said beautifully, it is the security of the soul that should be our chief aim, our chief gain, the security of your soul over gaining things in this world that will fade away, that will burn away. Now, I don't want to talk too much about it except for the idea that our soul has value you can't even understand. You see, the world, the enemy, he tries to put a price tag on our soul. You know, go to the bargaining table with your soul and the extra hours at work or the time with the boys in the bar away from the wife and kids. And you know what? Because the soul, I'll just get it back on the back end. I'll do this. And at the expense of our soul, we think there's a price on it. When Jesus died, he elevated the price of the soul to an eternal value. The soul is incalculable. The soul is incomparable. The soul is immeasurable. The soul is priceless. So I'm going to flip these questions on us. Ready? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? I say this, church. What does it profit us if we lose the world and gain eternity for your soul? And then the second question, or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Hey, what did God give in exchange for my soul? He gave me Jesus. The soul is priceless. Several weeks, Matt's been going forward in John. One of his messages was, how do I help when I still hurt? Do you remember it? How do I help when I still feel pain, when I'm in my misery? And I just invite you to see the cross. And if you could see the cross and what Jesus did on that cross, maybe your pain may not go away, but it may dissolve for that moment of ministry. And if you can see that, you can help even though you still hurt. Matt had a sermon titled, What Determines Your Devotion? Judas, shallow. Betrayal. Peter, pride. Denial. What determines your devotion? Again, I invite you to see the cross and allow the cross to determine your devotion. Do you know the road Matt talked about? The road being Jesus. I am the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. He's the road. Do you know the road? Again, I invite you to walk the path that leads to the cross, and from that point forward, you will identify the road that you're supposed to take. What does God actually look like? You, church. You, when you bear your cross and you suffer successfully, and people see God in you, because there's no other way for you to get through what you're going through but by God. There is no greater advantage to life than dying to live. Dying to live is profitable. Dying to live is possible. Dying to live is purposeful. Now, as the worship team comes, I give you a practical challenge for the week ahead. The practical challenge is put self down every morning, pick cross up every morning, and point people to Jesus every day. You see, sometimes self wants to sleep in, doesn't he? He wants to roll over, push snooze. But if you could put self down roll over, bear your cross, and you pray in that moment, your flesh is defeated and your spirit wins. I pray that you heard the heart of this message this morning. And I also pray that you realize your cross is the Father's way of forging Christ into your character. We are not spiritually dead yet, so we are not physically done yet. You've heard it. Let's do it. Thank you.